Hello, students. In the past few lessons, we've been talking about the basics of economics, things like scarcity, opportunity cost, and trade-offs. Well, in today's lesson, we're going to take a couple of those topics and put them on a graph or a curve. And first of all, I need to talk to you about how economists use this scientific method to help them formulate and find out, what's going on in the real world. So as you begin to take your notes today, I'll go ahead and explain this slide for you. Basically, economists try to help to explain real-world situations out there, complex problems, right? Things that are going on that don't have easy solutions to them. And so they don't come up with solutions just by, thinking about things. They actually formulate hypotheses. And they go through what we call the scientific method in order to see if what they think is happening is actually true. Can you recall the steps of the scientific method? It's probably been a little while, but if you recall, the basic steps are the scientist thinks about something, that he's curious about and thinks about some questions that maybe he'd like to answer. And then step 2 is where the scientist will formulate a hypothesis. And start to think about how he's going to test that hypothesis. In step 3 of this scientific method, the researcher, the economist, will go out and test his hypothesis. And sometimes that's done through surveys or interviews or maybe something as cool as an experiment. Whichever way they do, they go out, really doesn't matter, but they go out and get the information, they gather it, and then step 4 is basically looking at the data. What did their test show? Did their test show some sort of pattern? Did it show something cool, going on that maybe they didn't even think about? Those are some of the fun things that scientists get to enjoy. And then, of course, they look to see if the data proves whether or not their hypothesis was correct. And then normally, the last step of the scientific method is to go out and actually retest, do the study again. Most people don't just take the results of one experiment as a valid measure, right? So scientists like to show the validity of their hypothesis by going out and testing it again, okay? Now there's some difficulties or roadblocks for economists when it comes to using science, and that is their laboratory is the real world. Okay, and unfortunately, the real world cannot be controlled, right? The real world changes all the time. So where they may test their hypothesis under one condition the first time, the second time, the variables may change, okay? And so that's kind of the difficulty in being an economist and using science to validate their research. Now, one of the first things I want to teach you when it comes to using science and kind of using it with economics is their model called the production possibility curve. You might also hear of this curve as the production possibility frontier. I'll be referring to it as the PPC. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that. The production possibility curve, or what I call the PPC, illustrates the real world situations of trade-offs and opportunity cost. It shows all of the possible combinations of two products within a stated period of time. Now that may sound like we're just talking about businesses because we have the words product here, but really any economic actor can benefit from using this model. Just to kind of give you an example on an individual basis, if I gave you $20, what would you spend it on? Think about it. Now, this is hard-earned money here. So how would you spend $20? Maybe just off the top of my head, I would think of, food. Maybe go buy some clothes. Put some gas in your car if you have one. Let's see, go to the movies. One of my favorites, save it up. There's 5 things I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe you could add a couple of more ways to spend the money too. But in real life, as you can see, we can come up with several ways to spend $20. On a PPC, however, we can only focus on 2 of these options at any one time. So as you can see here, I have it listed as products, but it doesn't have to be products. It can just be your options, your choices that you have. Remember when we talked about trade-offs and opportunity cost. And so the PPC can really focus in on a couple of those 2 choices at any given time. Now, another example I'd like to show you is called the classic example of a production possibility curve, and it's looking at our government. Now, our government gets tax money from us citizens, and what can they do with that money? Well, they can do lots of things with it. They can spend it on things like Social Security and welfare programs. They can spend it on military budgeting and our veterans. They could possibly spend it on civilian goods and investing into the economy in that way. There's lots of examples of ways they can spend our tax money, but our classic example from your book is called guns versus butter. Here you can see from your book that the government can choose between spending money on military options, like what they call guns, or civilian goods, which will represent with the product of butter. Now, is that the only 2 things that they can spend money on? No, of course not. But remember, the PPC can only look at 2 things at any given time. Okay? So you can see here on the PPC, they have the choice of guns versus butter. Okay? So that's the classic example of the production possibility curve. Now, as we continue to look at some different examples, we already looked at an example on a personal level with the $20. We looked at the example of the government and their guns versus butter spending. We're also going to look at some other examples as well with businesses. I want you to remember that PPCs assume 2 things. These models are not perfect. So they assume a couple of things that we need to talk about. Okay? The first thing you need to understand is that with any model in economics, it's one moment in time. It's a snapshot. Okay? It assumes that the amount of available resources and technology will not change. So for example, with the government guns versus butter, classic example, that the amount of resources that our government has through tax money and etc., what they have is what they have. It's not going to change. So that model, that picture you just saw is one snapshot in time saying this is the amount of resources and technology that our government had at that time. The other assumption with the production possibility curve, as well, as any example that you look at of a PPC or possibility frontier, is that all of the resources that this person or this government or this business has, all the resources that they have are being used in the most efficient manner. Now, probably we can argue that. Is the government using all of their resources in the most efficient manner? We'll save that for another day. But we have to assume. We have to assume that they are using their resources in the most efficient way. Now, of course, if the amount of resources or technology changes, or if the government, if the person starts to use their resources wastefully, then the production possibility model will change or look different. And we'll look at that in class tomorrow. So for now, let's go ahead and get you started drawing a production possibility curve. Please go ahead and do this in your notes, but we'll start with a production possibility schedule. This is called a schedule. And this is for a company that produces cars and TVs. Okay? Now, of course, they make lots of things, but we're only focusing in on two because that's what a PPC does. It can only look at two items at any given time. So let's say this company produces that many cars at any given time. And they produce that many TVs at this snapshot moment in time. So what I want you to do is to go ahead and take those numbers and put them on a production possibility curve. So go ahead and draw that in your notes. We'll put cars on this side and TVs on this side. Okay? And you go ahead and put your numbers in here. And I'm going to kind of move around because of my ugly writing, but 500, 750, 1,000. And then go ahead and put your 200, 500, and 800. Okay? Now the one thing I do want you to notice is that as the number of cars as the number of cars increase, as production increases on cars, the number of TVs produced decreases. Why is that? The reason why is because of opportunity cost. As they choose to produce one good, they have less resources available to produce the other. And that is why as one, no matter which one we're talking about, cars or TV, as one increases, the other, the production of the other good has to decrease because it has less resources available. Okay? So what I want you to do in your Edmodo account, I want you to take a look at this picture. This is from your book, from the regular economics book. And this is production of earrings and bracelets by Chica. I'm going to call her Chica. And I'm going to put a question about this PPC on your Edmodo account. So go ahead and take a look at that and be ready to answer it in the turn-in box. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.